distant dreams. The world around us seemed like a Louisiana fairy tale.
Hello everybody, let's get this underway. Hello everybody, it's Ian here. Glad you made it. There's 5 guests at the moment and 3 of me actually. So welcome to the very first Create Your Life Story live Ustream broadcast. I'm juggling a lot of technology here, people. I'll be looking away from time to time as I deal with stuff. It's just the way it is. I don't have any producers or anything, so I've got to swing all this by myself. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking the time to actually send me through some emails and say g'day and all that sort of thing. I wanted to do this primarily because I want to touch base with you, connect with you a little bit more, and I just thought, well, why don't we invite the world to my place? So it's quite early here on a Sunday morning. If people like sleeping in on a Sunday morning, the East Coast here in Australia is not the place to be doing it. If you want to be involved in this, I got up at 5 to get ready for this because I wanted to sort of feel a bit bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but I've had my breakfast and I'm settling into the day dealing with you guys. But I know that we've got people hopefully all around the world, in the US, in the UK, hopefully Peter might be even watching us in Switzerland at the moment. So hopefully there's people all around the world and also here in Australia. If you're in New Zealand, it's already a couple of hours later, so it's a lot easier for you. But yes, welcome. So I wanted to talk today about a few things that have come through because a few people have sent through some emails. Let's have a bit of a look at these. Now, just a bit of housekeeping. There's a chat window which is on the right-hand side of your browser window if you're watching Ustream. If you happen to be on the site at the moment at createyourlifestory.com, there is no chat window. You need to actually go through to the Ustream site to get the chat window, whereas if you're at Create Your Life Story, you can just watch it, in which case I don't even know if you would be registered as a guest. As a matter of fact, I don't even know whether you'd be noticed as seeing this or whether you can be just stalking me. So the chat window's there, so please just put something in the chat window and ask me any questions. I'll keep a bit of an eye as we go and see if I can actually talk and write at the same time. It's, like I said, it's pretty challenging, as well as having to present to the camera and talk and make sense of everything. So yes, let's see how we go, eh? Now, as everybody knows, I sent out a series of emails and mentioned on the podcast and also on the blog posts about sending through some questions. I've had a few questions come through, and thank you very much, everybody. Peter in Luxembourg, who I've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, turned around and said, he actually asked if this podcast is going to be able to be available for download. To be honest, I don't know if it's going to be available to download. I don't think it is, but you will be able to watch it on Ustream. As we speak right now, this is being recorded. Yes, I was just checking to make sure. So it's being recorded, so it will be permanent. And from what I understand, and this is the very first time I've done a Ustream broadcast, this will be live and reviewable as soon as I stop recording and broadcasting. So if you happen to be over on the site where I've embedded a player, you'll be able to watch the whole thing again if you wanted to. But if you're here this early, why would you bother? So yes, so it will definitely be able to be viewed again, but maybe not downloadable. Peter did ask, he's currently in Switzerland, lucky fellow, but he lives in Luxembourg, and he sent through some audio as he walks through the forest. I've mentioned him on the podcast, like I said. Whoa, there goes one of my lights. Oh, well, we'll just have to deal with that. He said that, where are we? Collage, that's right. How do we make an interactive collage? Well, I decided to have a bit of a play. I might have to fix that light. I decided to have a bit of a play, and I thought that I might show you something. Have a look at this while I go and have a bit of a look at what's going on with this light. This is a collage that I've put together to actually show how you might be able to do some linking with vision. What you can see here is it's a bit of an experiment that I did. It came up when we did the conversation with Paul a few episodes ago, where he had his storyboard, and I asked him if the links that are on it were able to be clickable to go to the audio, and he said no, they weren't. They were just static graphics. And I thought, now wouldn't it be interesting if you could have it as a PDF and you could actually click on the links? So what I did a couple of nights ago is I pulled up this screenshot that I grabbed a copy of from iTunes. And you can see my 2 podcasts are on there. And what I did is I actually imported it into Pages. Pages is the word processing package that's available for Macs. On the PC world, it's Word. Now, I don't use Word. I don't know my way around it. And I assume that you can put graphics in it, and you can hyperlink text, and you can generate PDFs where everything is hyperlinkable. And if you click on the links, it takes you to a website. So assuming that Word can do that, or any other editing package that handles graphics and text, this is what I've done with Pages. What I've done there is I've taken that image. Now, what we're working with there is an image with all those different iTunes sort of images on it for podcasts. And what I did is I wrote 2 pieces of text. This is a link to your story. You can see that up there underneath the blue Your Story. And I've also written another piece of text under Create Your Life Story. Now, that text is just a normal standard old piece of text that I've linked using, I've just hyperlinked it so that if that was in Pages as you're using it and you click on it, it would take you to the website. But what I then did is I thought, now how do I make the graphic linkable? So what I did is I actually took a character, just a piece of text, a single letter of text, and I enlarged it until it basically was as large as the graphic, and I placed it over the top of the graphic. And then what I did to that is I made that hypertextable. So I just took that little bit of text and I turned it into a bit of a hypertext link. I could not just put a graphic, a block, a piece of an image in Pages and put it over the top of the graphic and do that. It wouldn't handle hypertexting a image, another item. It had to be a piece of text. But once I chose just a single letter, made it 125 pixels high or whatever it was, and then linked it, it was all of a sudden hypertextable. That was great. The trouble is it was just a random character and it looked really ugly. So what I then did is I basically made it invisible. I just turned around and made it opaque so that it became totally invisible. It actually worked really well, and I was quite happy with it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into the chat window the link to the PDF which I've uploaded so that you can go and also have a look at that. If you click on that link, it should have come through all right. I'm just going to go over to my browser window, other browser window where, no, it doesn't. I'm actually running my laptop over to the side and it's not allowing URLs to come through for some reason because, yes, okay. So I'll put a link to this on the blog post underneath this particular episode when I republish this so that you can go to that image and have a look at it and see how it all works. It's a real shame. I wonder how I changed that. Anyway, like I said, this is my first Ustream broadcast and I'm learning how to make this work as we do it. So there is a hypertext PDF that you can use. Now, that's right. When I was doing it in Pages, I created it in Pages and then exported it as a PDF. Once it was exported as a PDF, it was able to be, all those linking components were clickable. What you could do then is you could actually take those, the hypertext that it links to would be a place on the web where you would have your MP3, for argument's sake, sitting. So you could have a series of different MP3s that you're talking about on a storyboard or on a image of some sort, and you could have links to MP3s. Those links could be stored at places like archive.org or on your own server if you happen to have that sort of stuff and you can upload it. Something like archive.org would be very good. Now, I'm pretty sure that if you're seriously geeky, you'd be able to take those links and actually make them operate within the confines of your own computer so that you keep the MP3s, you have the storyboard, you have everything on your computer, and you don't have to actually have an internet connection to make it work. I've noticed that if I take a file of any sort and I drop it into my browser, it opens in my browser and it has a URL that is local on my computer. I'm sure that if you were to take that local address, you could actually use that to configure the text to make that hyperlinked. That would work on the computer that you constructed on. If you export it and say send it to somebody else as a package, as a package, it wouldn't work because they would be on a different computer. So you'd have to rename things and you have to be a little bit careful. You'd also have to work with the idea in mind that you're having to send the MP3s and the graphics as a package within a folder. And by doing that, you send just the whole folder of everything, and everything has to stay within that folder in order for it to be able to work. But I'm sure there are ways of doing it. But as far as making a image clickable, like for a storyboard, I think we were onto something there, and I'm glad I took the time to play around with it and see how it would work. And I think it's the start of a pretty good idea. Pam Wiley, I believe she's here in Australia, said, I've never recorded a conversation, but I'm interested in knowing more about recording equipment and editing. Well, I've mentioned in the last few episodes that I'm quite a fan of Hindenburg. Hindenburg is a tremendous editing program that I really love, and it comes out of Denmark. They originally had Hindenburg Basic, which was a free program, but now they're only making that available to NGOs and third world countries, unfortunately. You've used that for about 6 months, and I really fell in love with it, and I actually decided to go and buy Journalist because I liked it so much, which was about $70 from memory. I love Hindenburg because it's designed for editing voice. It's designed for doing what we're doing at Create Your Life Story. You can add music and you can add some effects and all that sort of thing, but it's not heavy duty. It's not designed for editing music and being a complete one-stop shop for everything. It's designed for quick editing. That's what I love most about it. I've been using GarageBand for years, and I found with GarageBand you actually have to drag everything across and be very careful with it, whereas with Hindenburg everything snaps into place. Now, HindenburgSystems.com, which is where you can find it, they are now offering a 30-day free trial of Journalist, and after the 30-day free trial you have to upgrade to the purchased version of it. So unfortunately there isn't a long-term free version unless you go with GarageBand or with Audacity. Audacity, a lot of people are very, very happy with. I've used it a tiny bit. I don't particularly like the graphic interface. I'm not a big fan of it, I know. Oh, there goes that light again. And it's back. It's a dodgy circuit connection, I think. Anyway, so Audacity's pretty good, and well, I've heard it's brilliant, but again, it's a little bit heavy on the capability of it. It's designed for music. It's designed to be able to be a one-stop shop and do everything, whereas we don't need all that back end. We don't need all those really deep things that you need with music and all the different things. We just want something that can trim voice and allow us to rearrange it and add a bit of music and a few effects. So I'm a huge fan of Hindenburg. But if you want free, Audacity or GarageBand, they're definitely the way to go. That's as far as editing. Pam also asked about recording equipment. I thought, seeing as how we're doing video, we might have a bit of a look at my recorders. One recorder I have with me all the time, and I don't want people to forget this little sucker, is the iPhone. This is a very good recorder, and especially if you were to add some other another app to it. Like I've actually got the Hindenburg app, which is designed for recording at other levels. It can record WAV files and better standards rather than just MP3. So if you look around for other apps and put them on your iPhone or your smart device, whatever you want to call it, you'll find that you can actually get some really high quality. Even if you just use the iPhone as it is with the onboard recorder and just record MP3, at least you're getting audio, aren't you? This is my Zoom H4. I've had this for some time now. Now, I bought this when I first started podcasting 4 years ago. I think it came out about 5 or 6 years ago. It cost me $600 in the day. The new version of it is the H4n. This is, I was never totally happy with it in one sense. You can hear it's a little bit plasticky and a bit cheap. Well, the Zoom H4n has actually got, I think, a die-cast aluminium body, and it's much more solid, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of equipment. And it's available for about here, and like I said, this was about $600. It's now for about $300. So they've come down in price and much better quality. It still has this configuration here with the microphones. And what's great about the Zoom H4 is you can put XLR plugs in the bottom here. I'm just trying to get the light on that so you can see it properly. So you can put XLR plugs, so you can put big microphones like this sucker into it. You can go through mixing desks. And in the center there, you've also got, let's see if I can show the light, get the light on it. Oh, there we go, that works. You can see in the center, you can also put a 1/4 inch jack into the center there. So if you don't have XLRs, you can just whack a 1/4 inch in there. Really good. The problem with jacking microphones into the bottom of these is you need to have a power supply. Now, if you use a microphone that needs a power supply, and this includes things like these big mics or even a lapel mic, you need to get a power supply. Now, this is a power supply. It's just a box with a battery in it and a little bit of circuitry, and you basically plug one end into your mic, your recorder, and your microphone into the other end. So you need a power supply, even if you're going to use a lapel mic. That's just the way it is. Although I do believe the H4n now has a mic in plug on the side. I don't have that on this, so I had to go to the trouble of getting power supplies and adapters and all sorts of configurations. But I think the H4n is much better. But frankly, for the situation that most of us are in, the H4n is a little bit of overkill. It is a brilliant, brilliant recorder, but it really is a little bit of overkill because it can do just too much, more than we need for the money. However, there's also the H2. Now, I've also realized that the H2n has come out. The H2n is basically an upgrade of the H2. The H2, and I was going to dig up a image for you. I wonder if I can find it quickly. The H4n is it reminds me a lot of a man's shaver, basically, and it looks really excellent. No, I can't find it quickly, and I don't want to burden you. It looks like a man's electric razor, and it's about that sort of size. And it's a tremendous unit, and it has a lot of the functionality that you can definitely use. But again, it's a little bit more than maybe you need. What I love is this little sucker. This is the H1. I love the H1, and frankly, it's the only recorder I use now. These microphones at the top there, now that there is just a protector, just to protect the microphone so you don't bump them. What I love about the H1 is you can use it as is. You can just walk up to somebody and say, excuse me, what do you think? Or you can plug in a microphone and you can just operate. You don't have to worry about power supplies. Here is one of my lapel mics. You can see I've just got a little windsock on that. And that just simply goes in there. That's all there is to it. And it's up and running. And the recording I did 2 episodes ago with Helen, I just used the stereo lapel mics, and I just clipped one on her and one on myself and plugged it straight in like that. And I was up and running. Takes no time at all. I plugged my headphones into the other side and I can monitor the whole thing as we were talking. Tremendous, tremendous little recorder, and so easy to use. Or come home and just plug it into my computer, transfer the files across. It really is just a tremendous unit, and it's only $100. I think, like I said, the H4n is about $300-400, something like that. The H1 is only $100. Throw a pair of lapel mics in. Let me show you the stereo lapel mics. Here we go. These are the stereo lapel mics. There's the plug. And there's the microphones. I don't have windsocks on these ones. That's the only difference between this and the other ones. So where are we? Okay, there we go. See, there's the stereo lapel mics. So I think they're about I've noticed the prices have gone up. They're about, they were $35. I think they're about $55 now, whereas the single mic is now about $35. Again, tremendous microphones from Darren at Giant Squid Audio Labs. I'm a huge fan of Darren. I don't get any return from him. I just like supporting him because he's producing a tremendous product for a very, very reasonable price. He makes them all at home, makes up the cables, all the connections, the capsules, everything. He puts them all together at home on his kitchen table, I believe. So it's always good to be able to support somebody who's giving it a bit of a shot, as we all are. So there's a little bit for you, Pam, about my recording equipment. That's what I use. Other than that, I record directly into the computer. I use, like I said, Hindenburg these days, and I just record directly into the software. Variation on what we're doing here today, except we're recording onto Ustream. We're actually recording up into the cloud. Kevin Farkas from the Social Voice Project. He has got this tremendous project developing where he is encouraging people to get out and about and record audio, and he's setting up all sorts of things to help people to do that. He really is putting a huge amount of effort into the quality of the audio. He's definitely an audiophile. I'm more interested in the content. I don't get really hung up on the quality. I like the quality to be good, and I hope this is all coming through well. It sounds pretty good at this end, but I'm not monitoring what I'm actually putting out there. My laptop has still got vision on it, so I'm assuming that the audio is coming through okay. So but yes, Kevin is doing a tremendous job, and he makes some really beautiful audio, and he's worth checking out. But he asks some really, really curly questions, and I'm not going to go deep into these because these are topics for other people. Now, I've never said that I'm an oral historian. I've never said that I'm a lawyer. I'm basically just this fellow who likes the idea of sitting down with people and recording life stories. And really, I suppose that's family history. I don't make any claims to being an oral historian. That's why I had Helen on the show a couple of episodes ago to take us through what oral history is and what is the difference between that and how can that be used for family history. So Kevin's decided to throw this at me about big topics. First of all, he's asked about ethical and legal issues, record keeping, documentation. Yes, big stuff. Informed consent, secret recordings, confidential information, protecting privacy, copyright, all that sort of stuff, making profit from life stories. How do you deal with all that? Now, this is a huge topic and something that really I need to find a lawyer or a solicitor to help me deal with because, and I put out a survey quite some time ago about privacy concerns, and I've been thinking quite a bit about privacy and what people's attitudes are, and I think that we need to ask a professional about privacy and see what they think. What I did find out is just about all of the oral history societies around the world have oral history agreements. If you go and check out, if you just do a search for oral history agreement, you'll find something on the internet. And if you search in your local locale, in your local area, when you do that search, you'll probably find something that's relevant to your region rather than dragging something from another country. But yes, there are oral history agreements, and they basically say, you're going to do the right thing by the person, and you're not going to do all the bad stuff. So it'd be worth checking out those oral history agreements. I haven't bothered with them to date because everything's been very, very casual, and everybody who comes on to my podcasts are fully aware that basically it's going to go out as a podcast, and that's just the way it is. Whereas if you're going to be storing stuff, if people are speaking to you in confidence with the idea that this information is to be held for some period of time, well, there's all sorts of different things that you probably need to dig into and try and understand. But again, I'm not going to go deep into this, frankly, just because I just don't know, and I'm going to find out a lot more. Kevin also asked about resistance. Why and how people resist recording their life story? How far to be pushy ethically and legally? Well, again, I'm not going to talk about legally because I actually don't know. Effects on quality of experience, strategies to overcome or work with resistance. I'm a huge fan of having an attitude that you can't make anybody tell you anything. And if you could, well, you'd be, just somebody that the CIA would want to know about. Nobody tells anybody anything unless they want to at the end of the day. Now, that could be because, they've been boxed into a corner, so they'll tell you something. But if they're being forced to tell you something, do you know it's actually the truth? And then what is the truth anyway, as we discussed with Helen? Memory is faulty. People don't necessarily have to tell the truth. They couch things relevant to the story they want to present. So, yes, it's how do you get people to communicate? Well, I've often said that probably the only thing that I bring to podcasting, the only thing I bring to the technology, and it's not skill with technology because I'm still working very hard to understand it and deal with it. The only thing I probably bring is the ability to have a conversation with people. And when I turn that on, when I turn on the ability to have a conversation with somebody, and I tell you, this is pretty hard talking to a camera and just presenting. But when I'm talking to somebody, I want to engage with them. I want to really get into them. And I take on an attitude of fascination and empathy and compassion, these really noble attitudes. And I'm patient. And I think this is something that a lot of people make the mistake. I've made the mistake a couple of times myself. You do need to be patient. You do need to let somebody warm up to you. Let somebody realise that you are genuine and you do care and that you're not there for ulterior motives. If you're, you've had that situation where you go to buy a car and you've got the dodgy car salesman and he's got an agenda and his only agenda is to sell you a car and get money out of your pocket. It's really obvious. But then you go and meet another car salesman and, intellectually that that's his agenda too, but he's charming, he's smart, he's suave, he talks to you about everything else other than the car and at least seems to take a keen interest in you. Now, you can fake that, but it's a bit different for a car salesman. He's only dealing with you for half an hour. If you're sitting down with somebody for 5 hours, I defy you to be able to fake it because it's exhausting. It's just plain exhausting. So I think basically you have to be fascinated with them. You have to be genuinely interested in what they're saying and you have to find that thing in them that is fascinating. If you do that and engage with them, take time for it to evolve, particularly take time, I think people tend to warm up. And as they warm up, they open up and they start to tell you things. And if you reveal a little bit of yourself, I think it goes a very long way as well. My father, who we've just recorded, my brother-in-law recorded him just in the last few weeks, did not want to tell me any of his life stories. But when he listened to his brother, he started warming up to the idea and he started telling me stories just off the cuff. So I decided to push him a little bit more and eventually we got the recordings done. It was because of listening to his brother that he realised that maybe he had something to say as well. So the question that Kevin asked was, the resistance. Why do some people not want to tell a story? Well, I think for a lot of people, they just don't think they've got an interesting story to tell. And it wasn't until my father had heard his brother that he realised that he could add to the conversation. So it actually helped him to open up to realise that he had something to say. There's a fellow in Sydney also who I've been trying to get for several years to have come on the podcast at Your Story, at yourstorypodcast.com. And I've asked Freddie to come on and tell us his stories about working in the film industry where he's a special effects technician, especially with explosives. He really knows his ways around making things go bang. He's an older guy, he's in his 60s. And he learned how to make things go bang because he was in the demolition part of the engineers when he was in Vietnam. And that's where he learned his explosive skills. And he was a tunnel rat. Now, the tunnel rats, for people outside of, a lot of Australians don't even know about the tunnel rats, but the tunnel rats were little guys. They tended to be smaller men who went down into the tunnels to chase the Viet Cong, to go and find documents and all this sort of stuff. And they tended to be little guys because the tunnels were so small. And they went down with just a pistol and nothing else. And I think that's one of the scariest and bravest things you can do, to go into a dark tunnel not having any idea who might be down there waiting for you, and all you've got is a pistol. And a lot of the tunnel rats actually discovered all sorts of valuable documentation which helped the war effort a great deal. But he's got all these amazing stories. And I've asked him to come on the podcast, and he goes, well, I've got nothing to say. And then we started talking about things a little bit. And he went, but my father, he fought in the Second World War? Yeah, he fought in the Second World War. I think he was a fighter pilot or something. He had some amazing yarns to tell, yada, yada. And he started talking about his father, and I said, hey, Freddie, that sounds a little bit like you, doesn't it? And he stopped, and he went, yeah, maybe my kids might actually like to hear some of these stories. So by linking him to somebody he admires, gave him appreciation that there are people in his life who might admire him. And I thought that was a good way of warming him up to the idea as well. Yes. So there's a couple of ideas. Now, Kevin also asked about recording sensitive or difficult topics. How to handle stories related to violence, taboos, cultural sensitivities, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychological issues. Mate, what a question. Yes, I am going to be reaching out, and I've intended this for some time, a bit like the privacy, copyright issues. I'm going to talk to a lawyer for them. For these sorts of topics, I need to talk to a psychologist or a therapist. Yes, they're very difficult things to talk about. How do you help somebody talk about abuse or nasty situations? If you've been to war, how do you get them to be able to tell you those war stories that you'd love to hear? Very, very difficult things to negotiate, and I don't totally know how to deal with that. Again, I just keep coming back to empathy and time, build a relationship. I think that's probably the best way. And unfortunately, I don't think it's always possible, because there are some things that you just can't approach because, well, imagine talking to a woman who's been a rape victim. I think for a lot of men, because remember, men tend to rape women, it's very difficult for us to get on her right side. So maybe it's necessary for another woman to record her. So maybe it's not possible just because you're the wrong gender if you happen to be male in that situation. So yeah, particularly difficult. But again, like I said, non-judgment and empathy, I think, goes a long way to helping people deal with these sort of stuff. I'm very good at not being judgmental. I think everybody has a right to live their life however they choose. And I sort of go, well, okay, these things have been tough in your life, and so be it, that's a real bugger, but so be it. And I think having that attitude of compassion without emotionally buying into it goes a long way to helping people open up. Another tactic, if you want to call it that, is to also share a little bit of yourself. Now, a lot of people, and this is one reason why I actually dislike the term interview, a lot of people when they go into these sorts of recordings is they approach it as an interview. It's a question and answer thing, whereas I think it needs to be an engaged conversation, directed primarily towards them, sure, but a conversation. And a conversation has to be two ways. Now, sure, you're going to be primarily talking about them, and you're not going to be pumping your own ego into it, but I think it's important to also share a little bit of yourself, and you can share just snippets of yourself that will help them open up. And I've done this, like I've been separated and divorced. I've felt heartache of breakup and all that sort of thing. Now, sharing that with somebody helps somebody else appreciate that I get where they're coming from when they talk about the distress of their marriage failing, for argument's sake, because I can relate to them and I've told them so. Death. Up until 2000, I really didn't have any death in my life. And for me to be able to talk about death to anybody was actually quite difficult because I didn't have the level of empathy that's really necessary. And then my sister died in 2001, and I got thrown into that maelstrom of dealing with grieving and everything. And if somebody is talking about, losing a sibling, at least I can now say, yes, well, this has happened to me. And that these sorts of sharings of stories will help people to connect with you in a way that's not really possible any other way, because it's theory otherwise. I think when it comes to veteran stories, and this is something else that Kevin's talked about, a lot of veteran stories are what he calls them a catalogue of events. They're not real stories. And again, I think veteran military stories are really hard. And I think, again, I'd love to do some veteran stories, but the reality is I've never been to war. I absolutely despise the military. And I think that I maybe I'm not the right person to actually talk to somebody about war stories because I don't get it. And they know I don't get it. And they have difficulty opening up with me because of that. So I sort of come back to, with a lot of these sort of things, it's, well, you've got the who, what, when, where, how type questions, right? You know, who are you? What were you doing? When was it happening? Who was with you? How did it happen? Yeah, all questions asking about the event. They tend to be the more catalogue type questions. But I think the most important question often to ask is why. And if you were, I think I can get away with this because it comes from a place of innocence, really, and I have done it a couple of times, is if you're talking about a war story, why did you go to war? It's a pretty significant question, isn't it? It might lead to all sorts of places. But you can ask, who went to war with you and what did you do and where was it? Yeah, okay, but they can throw those comments off fairly quickly. But why? Why did you go to war? Well, that might dig a little bit deeper. But again, I think a lot of these people, have had such difficult times. The same with the abuse and, post-traumatic stress disorder and all that sort of stuff. Most of the people had such difficult times. They want to let sleeping dogs lie, to use that expression. And yeah, it's best not to talk about it because it's all too painful. So I think particularly difficult. I think the best people to do that sort of stuff are people who are either trained at it, and therefore the people come to them for that reason. That's why therapists are good, because they're trained at it, but also the people are there with the intention of telling the therapist, or somebody who's been through a similar experience. So we're sitting on 37 minutes now. I don't want this to go on too long. I noticed that there are 6 people who are guests. I wonder who you are. Nobody has sent anything through to the chat window, but let's just take a couple of ideas from the survey or contacts that I've had. What shall I pick here? Yes, privacy. Privacy is a big one for a lot of people, and I think that's worth just talking about a little bit. Again, I want to talk to a lawyer about this sort of stuff, but I think, frankly, privacy is even getting away from lawyers and the legal people, because this thing called the internet that we're currently sitting on means that really there isn't any privacy anymore. That's what it comes down to. Privacy is even a thing of the past for people who aren't on the internet. My father's not on the internet. He's never even put his finger on a computer, but he's on the internet. Because I've taken some photos of him, because I've commented about him, because I've now got some audio, which I'll probably make a website about him. So my father is no longer private either. And even if I was to not take photos and not make a website for him, he's still on the internet anyway, because, he turns up in all sorts of little places like banking accounts and, okay, sure, they're behind firewalls and all that sort of stuff. But, all you need to do is be in the background of a photograph that ends up on Flickr or something, and you're on the internet. Privacy is really quite a thing of the past, and I think people who struggle with that really struggle with the internet. You almost need to be a hermit to avoid it. The other way of approaching it, and this is the way I've approached it, and you'll notice this if you look at all my branding around the internet, is I recognise there is no such thing as privacy, and I've just gone, it's all out there. I have a bit of an attitude that if you open your mouth, you've lost control of the information. If you write it down, you've lost control of it, even if it's on a scrap of paper. So if you don't want something to be out there, you need to be very, very careful how you ever express it. And it's probably best if you never express it. Just in the last week, we've seen the tapes recorded with Jackie Kennedy Onassis, revealing her opinions of people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Indira Gandhi and all the famous people of her time. And she's scathing, supposedly, from what I've read, absolutely scathing about what she says about a lot of these people. But she said that they couldn't be released for 47 years, and that time has now come about. But now the information's out. And this is the point I want to make, is often we get hung up on the information when it's fresh and when it's new. But we realise that as time passes, the information loses its sting. And a lot of people don't put stuff down for fear that it's going to harm other people. But the reality is, in a generation or three's time, nobody cares. Nobody cares about the harm. And that, it takes the sting out of it. And by releasing things later, you can actually remove a great deal of any potential harm that might come from it. I have an attitude on the internet. Like I said, all my branding is Ian Cath. I have it everywhere. I am completely open, and I'm not the sort of person who's not particularly private, so it works reasonably well with me. But I do couch what I say. I am careful what I express, and I have a measure for it, and I do not say anything. And you'll even notice that you won't hear me swear virtually ever on the internet. And that's because I have an attitude very much of, I want everything that I have released out there to be available to be listenable to people who I measure to be similar to my mother, who is 78, and my daughter, who is 20. If I can satisfy those two people, I think I can be proud of everything that I've published. And that's very much the attitude I have. I could, if I had sensitive material, if there was some uncomfortable things in my life that I wanted to share with people, if I'd hurt people that I wanted to apologise about, well, I could maybe do a time capsule for that sort of stuff. And this is something that I've mentioned just briefly, something that we need to dig into at some stage of, is actually post-releasing stuff. You create a website that maybe doesn't actually launch for 20 years. You have audio that's embedded on it that's private and nobody will hear for 20 years. Maybe you leave something in your will where you've got a thumb drive, one of these little suckers, and you leave that in your will, and when you die, the solicitor hands that across to the family and there's all this information. It's possible to do the time capsuling of very, very sensitive material that you don't want to be around for. So that's an option, I think, for privacy. But I think it's a huge topic and something that we're going to have to dig into with some very specific podcast episodes. But generally, my attitude is, if you don't want it out there, don't even open your mouth. Mr. LJ Walker, who's just joined us. G'day, LJ. I joined late. Will the recording be available later? Yes, I mentioned that a little bit earlier, mate. The recording, it will be available. On the site at Create Your Life Story and on Ustream. I think it's going to be available as soon as I smack stop recording. And you can go back and see what I've been talking about. Yes, and I don't think it's going to be downloadable, but I'm not quite sure because this is the first time I've ever done a Ustream broadcast, so I'm not quite totally sure with how everything works. We're sitting on 44 minutes or close enough to it, and I think basically that's where I'd like to wrap it up now. I've still got a few other topics here which I could go into, but we might save them for another time. And we might look at this. So does anybody out there have anything that they would like to say? Now's your chance. Send it through in the chat window. I'd love to know. This has been quite an experiment for me. It's been a big project, actually. It's taken me probably about 15 or so hours to understand all this technology and get a bit of an idea of how it all works and putting it all together. And it's been quite a task. But actually sitting down and doing the recording's probably been one of the easiest parts of it, frankly. So yes, that's probably going to be just about it for the day. I'd like to thank everybody who came along, who's stepped in for this first Create Your Life Story Ustream broadcast. I don't know how many of these I'm going to do because it's so much work. I probably won't be doing too many of them. I prefer audio because audio gives me the ability to relax and I don't have to present to the camera at the same time as I'm presenting to the microphone and keeping a bit of an eye on all the technology that's around me. But thanks very much for coming and being part of this little... See? Yeah, I've got to look away while I'm bringing a bit of music up. If I didn't have the camera, I wouldn't have to worry about that so much, would I? So, so thanks very much, everybody, for being part of this. And I hope to do it again sometime in the future, maybe in a few months' time. stay close. Let me know how things are going in your world. You can always get through to me by sending an email to chat@createyourlifestory.com. And the site, of course, is at createyourlifestory.com. Create Your Life Story is part of the Lifestyle Pod Network. I didn't get a graphic for that. I should have got a graphic for the Lifestyle Pod Network, but unfortunately I forgot to put that in the stream. I'll maybe do that next time. Lifestyle Pod Network is a very cool operation here in Australia that James Williams runs, and gives people the opportunity to discover other podcasts that fit in with that whole lifestyle sort of idea. This music that you're hearing at the moment, I get from Iodo Promonet. There will be links at the bottom of this episode if you like it. This is Hey Nah, I think it is. I quite like it. It's good closing music. And you can get that from Iodo Promonet at Iodo Reliance. That's about it for today. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks very much for being part of Create Your Life Story's first Ustream broadcast. It's been a bit harrowing, but I think we got through it. I hope you got some information from it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks everybody for being part of it. Bye-bye for now, Bye.
Wait till I get your butt home. But first we'll make a stop on Basin Street by the Rue Carré. There's nothing like a party down in the old trimming. It's 3 in the morning and the joint just started jumping. And now you looking good, so let's party till the sun come up. Yeah. Wait till I get your ass home. But first we'll make a stop on Basin Street by the Rue Carré. There's nothing like a party down in the old trimming. I know it's 4:30 and the joint just started jumping. And now you're looking good, we gon' party till the sun come up. And now you're looking good, we gon' party till the